and it can be tailored to the individual needs and adjusted if the government decides or the owner of this product decides rather to move away from the 20 years to 100 years or so, yes, and that would have an impact on the premium itself. So both coverage and both frequency and severity are covered. Next slide, please. Now let me wrap everything up with some key takeaways of this part of the presentation before I hand back to Rowan. What I have tried to elaborate is that PRISM covers and provides natural catastrophe frequency both for cover for frequency and large catastrophes. It is based on local governmental tax income, and the payout in return is also a percentage of the LGU tax income. It uses methodologies which have been proven since years. A couple of years we based this system also for a micro insurance scheme here, the CLIMB scheme in the Philippines. So it is proven. It's based on real-time monitoring, absolutely transparent, scientifically based and neutral, and can be demonstrated. Now actually in the technical session we showed a slide that the ongoing flooding, the ongoing heavy rainfalls in the south would have triggered this insurance payout as well. Next one please. Well, and once again, it is very simple, very straightforward, proven, and it could be implemented as early as within the next 6 months. So if the decision is to use this momentum after this horrendous tragedy with Typhoon Yolanda, Haiyan, this momentum also with the international donor market, but also with the government here, we jointly could start this off and from there develop a long-term perspective with a much larger picture, and Fonden in Mexico would be really a blueprint of what happened in other parts of the world with such an insurance concept for catastrophes. Thank you very much, and I hand back to Rowan.
Next slide, please. Ernst, thank you. Essentially, we have a very simple and straightforward and tested concept which has been developed with many partners over some years and has actually been operational for 2 or 3 years. So it is there. We absolutely recommend that for a set of fundamental insurance reasons, and not least a set of humanitarian resilience reasons, that if possible this type of scheme is mandated across all the municipalities and cities in the Philippines. And I have to say I can't echo Ernst's views about the timing opportunity that is key, and that actually there's an enormous appetite to develop a longer and more strategic support for this country in the years ahead. And with that, we'd like to suggest from our experience, Senator Lagarde, a kind of a next steps timeline that to enable us to be able to implement this by June the 1st, by the next typhoon season, and also in time for a set of very important international processes. So we would suggest something, Senator Lagarde, along these lines, that it is agreed in principle to launch a mandatory municipality and city-based nationwide disaster insurance solution by June the 1st. And that agreement in principle has to come really very quickly. We almost think within days, because there's much to do in the next 4 months. And within that period to identify any impediments and bottlenecks and roadblocks from legislation or other things that might come in the way. And indeed, we had a very useful technical discussion just now, and I think there was basically broad support for what we were talking about. People raised some very useful points, but I think none of them were seen as being fundamental challenges, but ones we really had to address together. But once that is done, very rapidly, a PRISM core task force should be formed by the end of this month, by January, based on the sort of personnel who would need to be in it, connected to a wider group, to deliver this by June the 1st. By the 28th of February, effectively by the end of next month, that task force should present its plans and related development requirements to the chair of the Climate Change Committee and indeed the Secretary of Finance for their input, and then to confirm a decision to proceed with the programme for June the 1st. The Secretary of State for Finance and the chair of the Climate Change Committee would form a PRISM task force to implement this, and that task force would report back to those two co-chairs by the end of April, when it would be presented, and the co-chairs would confirm a decision to implement PRISM by June the 1st, subject to any recommendations or authorizations that may be required. By the 15th of May, all final approvals and authorizations to implement it should be obtained. By the 22nd of May, the programme would be underwritten and in place and would incept on June the 1st. And from June the 1st, protection would be available, and indeed work would begin immediately on how to develop it further and broaden it for the next year. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. This would be a first start in a much broader approach, but it would be a national scheme. But let me make no mistake, this is in a global context. Obviously, this would need to be presented locally to the population here in the Philippines, but within a few weeks there is a very important regional meeting of the UN to work through the Hyogo framework for the Asian and ASEAN region in Bangkok. I think this would be a key focal point of that meeting. The same time, there is a major meeting in London looking at the global financial and private sector response to the Hyogo framework. Indeed, I think this would be an object lesson in how the public and private sectors work together. A little later, the APEC organization hold their disaster risk meeting in September, rapidly followed by the UN Secretary General's Climate Action meeting in New York. Again, what is happening here will be seen, I believe, as a model for what needs to happen elsewhere. And then ultimately, of course, in March next year, a new Hyogo framework will be put in place, incorporating the finance and private sector as well as the public and scientific ones. And indeed, I think at that point, what is being done here in the Philippines will effectively be incorporated within a global framework which will operate not just for the next 10 years, but maybe even longer. With that, I'd like to thank again Senator Legarda and my colleagues at Munich Re, those on the stage but also in the audience, for your attention and look forward to the ensuing discussion. Jerry, who's next?
Allow me to ask some very basic questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Douglas and Mr. Rauch, for these. I just want to know, perhaps from Rowan, how can the Philippine government effectively pursue the development of a national catastrophe risk framework, including the promotion of disaster insurance in partnership with the private sector?
Well, I think
this is a new concept to us. And I don't think many countries in the world embark on this yet. From my understanding from Jerry, it's only Turkey and Mexico that's doing this.
They're certainly the absolute leaders in this.
They're the leaders in this, yes.
There are a handful or two of others who are embracing the same path. If I may say, Senator, this country's already shown the key aspect, which is leadership. And focus, and in discussions with many senior folks here in both the public and private sector, I think everybody understands that we need a paradigm shift. I keep hearing those phrases, paradigm shift. Things have changed. We need to reconnect with nature and understand it and work with it. I would say that the critical thing, Senator, is now to translate all that leadership, all that wonderful legislation you have, and to use this moment, this 5 months between now and June, to take that and execute this critical first step. The first step is often the hardest, And from that, we can build together so much. But that is the key. We have to now mobilize and focus and basically deliver. And I do think that the leadership you bring with your with your colleagues here to drive these task forces in the next few months will be key.
My question is, if we were reinsured before Typhoon Haiyan, what would the outcome have been? Would it have been any different? Is this amount that would be considered as a rehabilitation cost be much lesser insofar as the local governments and the national government is concerned? It would have been fully covered by the reinsurers. Is that correct?
Well, as Ernst will confirm, we've modelled what this particular product would deliver based on the assumptions we felt that the country would seek, and the returns for those municipalities would be up to, if we choose the right trigger, 100% of their annual tax base for that year. But with the authorities, we can actually work and develop whatever range of solutions in terms of capital response is required based on the premium available within the Philippines and any external sources. So the short-term answer is that the insurance and reinsurance can deliver immediate capital response, but in terms of the longer term, it's how this mechanism drives and helps support and enforce resilience requirements, whether it's from building codes and building zoning to what have you. It's insurance and the access to capital and the rules it provides which can enhance the implementation of legislation that is maybe already on the books.
I think we can allow the audience to ask questions. Maybe we can start with, okay, Sunny, Commissioner Alvarez of the Climate Change Commission. You can use a microphone there so that, okay, great. And then we can have the chairman, the vice chair, Lucille.
This is not really that fresh an issue. In 2006, as a matter of fact, I distributed a copy of the press report that happened. In 2006, I filed an insurance for Philippine crops damage owing to climate change. And the comment was that, how can you insure something which is not the destruction from the act of God? It's from the act of man. Of course, it was just a joke. But, as he points out, this gentleman, there's a paradigm shift. This is no longer an arena which may be within the competence of corporate insurance actuarial calculations. That's why the United Nations has the Ban Ki-moon Fund. In 2020, all the countries of the world, especially the developed countries, will be raising $100 billion to cover up this disaster. This disaster is of such magnitude that the resolution I filed in 2006 in Boston was deliberated on for about 3 hours in the Conference of Parties. I'll give you a copy of this. And it was held in abeyance. Because the disasters, if we see what has happened here in the Philippines, and that is according to Congressman Gatchalian, 12 billion only is the second most destructive. If of such magnitude that even the Lloyd's insurance, if we reinsure with Lloyd's, may not be in a position to take over the responsibility. The private sector handling this insurance process may create more problem than solution. The multilateral agency of the UNFPCC